Welcome to the How We Can Heal podcast. My name is Lisa Danilchuk, and I'm a psychotherapist specializing in complex trauma treatment. I'm a graduate of UCLA and Harvard University, and I'm thrilled to share these reflections on how we can heal with you today. Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 12, season 3 of the How We Can Heal podcast. I've got Alex Castellanos here, and we are going to take some time to reflect. Not too much time because we haven't been sleeping much lately. It's been about 6 weeks since we brought Isabella into the world. Well, I mean, I brought her in, let's be honest, but you had something you caught her.
Yeah, I caught her.
You caught her. So we brought her in, I did carry her for 10 months.
A little bit here and there.
You helped here and there for sure. You were involved with the process. So thank you for that. So we would like to reflect on this beautiful season that was really meant to come out a little bit before the baby was born, but it's been a beautiful process nonetheless.
Yes.
Right? Just learning and hearing feedback from each of you as we've gone through releasing each episode. So today, we're going to take some time to reflect. I'm going to answer a few questions that have come in, and we'll talk a little bit about what's next. Are you ready to roll, Miller?
I'm ready.
Let's go. Okay. So the first thing that came in were a few questions from audience members. The first one comes from Matthew in Oakland, and he said, I'm not a therapist, but I am interested in helping people heal. This entire season is all about dissociation. Why do we all need to know about dissociation? And I have lots of thoughts about this, but the main answer is just to have more awareness, right? So if we're aware of something, we can catch it sooner. We can hopefully prevent it. We can help people get proper treatment and just reduce suffering overall for folks who really are going through it. Most of the time in extreme forms of dissociation, like we've covered this season, people are having a pretty tough time. So global awareness, societal awareness helps support those people. It's kind of like, so my man friend here, Alex, has been for many, many years in emergency services. So he has like those epic first aid kits wherever we go, right? In the back of every car, there's like a tourniquet and all this stuff, right? And I've had some training in first aid. I vomit at needles and pass out when I give my own blood as an adult. So not quite my cup of tea. But when I've learned, what to do if I'm out in the wilderness and somebody gets a puncture wound, I've learned to just leave the thing in it, right? Like somebody gets hit with a dart, don't pull it out. That's like a basic medical knowledge that a lot of people benefit from many of us knowing it. Would you say?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you arrive on the scene in an emergency and somebody knows that, it helps you, right? Helps you get them to medical care quicker. It helps you, not have to manage so much distress. It just reduces the drama and the trauma, really. So I think of mental health and dissociation. I always like to pick physical examples because those are tangible and we get those more. Kind of like all of us knowing CPR, all of us knowing, and it doesn't even have to be a reaction or a treatment. It's just the awareness. It's just the awareness. Don't pull the thing out, right? And I like that one because it goes back to what we talked about in our first episode, which was, often people go, oh, you've been through trauma. Tell me the story, right? And they want you to just like get to the heart of it. Let's fix it right now. And that approach, it can be too much too fast, as we talked about, can be akin to just like, let's just pull the dart out of your arm instead of stabilizing you and getting you to care and then figuring out a strategic way to get it out and get, the right support in at the right time. So I think it makes it better for everyone rather than the absence of knowledge or the ignorance of that knowledge making it worse for everyone. So that's my answer to you, Matthew, in Oakland. We could talk about it more, and I'm sure we will in future episodes and seasons kind of touch on this topic. We have another question I want to get to. Shireen from Texas says, I love learning about this, and I'm in a bit over my head. I'm a yoga teacher, and I'm wondering, can yoga help with dissociation? Now, we've had episodes on this show where we've talked about yoga and trauma. I have a whole book about yoga and trauma recovery. We do talk about dissociation and how yoga connects to that in depth there. And it's also on Audible if you're a listener, so you can go there. if you want like the deep dive, but I'm going to give a short answer to this question, which is yes. But we do need to kind of have all those precautions in place. Like we're not trying to go in there. I have been in yoga workshops. Have you been with me in any of these where people are like, let's do shadow work. Let's get in there. We just met. Pull up your deepest, darkest memories. And I don't recommend that. I've also been in workshops where it's the general public, but there's like a lot of really deep getting in touch with your pelvic floor and pelvic muscles. And those are great workshops. But if you're working with sexual trauma, that might be too much too fast. So hopefully in the context of everything we talked about this season, that makes sense. But what I like to think of in terms of yoga is that it's an associative process. Remember in episode 3, Michael Coy was talking about EMDR, and he was talking about how do we define dissociation? Well, dissociation is a disconnect, right? The lack of association. And in healing, we're often looking to reassociate things, right? We're looking for these processes of association, and EMDR is one of those. I think yoga is one of those too, because it asks you to get in touch with your body. Yeah. Alex and I were talking earlier about just that like head-heart connection even, right? Like, can it be dissociative if your head and your heart or your head and your body aren't connected? Yeah, it's a lack of association. So we're inviting association often in yoga. Yoga means union. So the really important thing to know there is just to not do too much too fast or force it, right? And to bring in all these supports and bring in all these options. Many healing modalities have this opportunity for association, and that can be profoundly, profoundly healing. Like, I don't know if you have memories of being in a yoga class. I certainly do. And just like feeling an emotion that I hadn't been super connected to, like a wave of sadness comes through and you go, oh, I didn't realize that was there. But now that I've moved my body and breathed for an hour, I kind of unearthed it and was able to move through it. You know, when we're digging for that stuff and we want it, it's a very different experience than when it just sort of, comes in out of nowhere and floods everything. So short answer, I think, yes, yoga is about union and connection. And in many different ways and from many different angles, it can be a process of association. So we just be aware of that, take that slow. Anything you want to add, my love, or questions?
Sure. So I was thinking dissociation in terms of like thinking of yoga. So yoga helps you connect your head to your body or body to your head. And that is how you can actually be able to see the being, right? You within.
Yeah.
And so if you are not connected, then you have two.
So it's a split.
It's a split, exactly. And dissociation happens to be like fragment or a fragment, right? Depending on how you got there, right? The trauma that got you there or got a person there.
So you're making me think now of what Marianne Kate described in her episode with dissociation, with when we start to talk about fragmentation, especially of identities or like dissociative identity. You think about a car with multiple people in it, and the driver is like the person running the show. And then there might be a child in the back seat. There might be a teenager in the front passenger seat. And DID, when we really have that deep sort of amnesic split and different sort of personalities or identities switching, then we'll have the whole driver will switch, right? Mm-hmm. But many of us can probably relate to, and this also makes me think of Wendy's episode. She talks a lot about ego state therapy. We can have different identities or ego states within us. Like we could all probably relate to being in the driver's seat of the car and having other feelings or voices come up. Like say you're at work and your boss says something and you're driving the ship, you're running the show, you're driving the car, and part of you gets angry and wants to just mouth off, right? And drop all the F-bombs. But that part stays in the back seat, right? While the part in front goes, okay, sure, I'll have that to you by Friday or whatever it is, right? There's these circumstances, and I'm using one where there's like safety and like your livelihood might depend on it, right? So there's reasons we do this. And most of us can connect with like, oh yeah, there's something else happening. And I always think with yoga, to go back to Shireen's question, there's so much in the back seat. There's so much in the car that we've just packed up and are carrying along with us all the time that then we sort of take this mindful, slow process of moving and breathing and inviting connection. And then it all just comes up and out, right? It's like, oh, where'd that come from? So I don't even remember your original question at this point because I'm working on 3 hours of sleep these days. But I do think that head and heart, right? That alignment there, head and body, and feeling those as different parts is something that a lot of people describe. I mean, I've even had people come into my private practice and I say, well, where do you feel that in your body? Very common somatic psychotherapist question. And they're like, what? I don't feel that in my body. And, we're all wired differently. So it's not that there's a right and wrong, but it's super interesting, especially when that person's like, I remember when I used to feel it, but I don't anymore. Or I want to feel it, but it's totally numb, right? Numbness is the only sensation they can track. So yeah. Anything else you want to say about that head and heart, mind and body?
But I was thinking about Matthew in Oakland.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking about trauma. It's like once you understand trauma, it's easy to spot.
Yeah.
Right. And so context, if you can spot dissociation or like when people go from one
state maybe
to the other, then you can have kind of like a little bit of context of like how severe that trauma was or the whole thing of complex trauma or, all these things. So, so it kind of gives me even like another layer of context when I'm encountering someone who may be experiencing.
Yes. And I think it's great if we all have this understanding more because colloquially, somebody might say like that person just changed or switched in the middle of the conversation. Like, what's wrong or what's going on. They might not understand it. They might even say that was crazy or,
right.
Or if they're getting diagnostic, they might say, oh, that's, psychotic or schizophrenic because it's voices. And it's like, well, the more you know and the more you ask. And this makes me think of way back to season 1, Heather Hall, who talks about, right? You worked at SF, San Francisco General, at the hospital, and you see people come in, perhaps homeless people with a lot of mental health issues. They're in there, they're saying something that doesn't make sense in the present environment. But as Heather was saying, as you talk to them and you trace back, it makes a lot of sense based on their trauma history, right? Thank you for your thoughts, my love.
Thank you.
Shall we answer one more question?
Sure.
All right. We've got Marisa in Italia, in Italy, who's a psychologist who says she had a client who was very athletic, recalled memories, and then had a very difficult time being in her body after. Is this common? This client found acupuncture helpful, though Marisa's not sure how or why that helped. So yes, I would say my experience, both with my own clients and people I have done consultation with, have found that when there's a memory that's recovered, our relationship to our body, like that body material can come up too. And we talked a little bit about this in Marianne Kate's episode around somatoform dissociation, right? When there's like a piece of our body that's really involved with the trauma or that's holding something. So yeah, our relationship with our body can change when we sort of recover a piece of memory or identity. And that's not uncommon. And with that, I would say it's very individual in terms of what helps when, but sometimes when people are really smart and they're really athletic and they're, I'm used to being in my body and I'm used to being in my head, but something switched and now like those ways of coping aren't working anymore, or those ways of just being and living and being in the world aren't working anymore. That's when I think some of these more energetic therapies, maybe hypnosis, like we talked about with Wendy Lemke, more sort of quote unquote right brain, or just different approaches that aren't going so straight to things I think we go to easily in Western culture, like let me use my mind or let me use my muscles. But going to something like the subtle body and acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, that can just be a different angle. So we're not kind of playing tug of war with the way things already exist. We're transcending and just addressing the body differently. So I think that's my hunch on why that worked. But of course, we always want to know a lot of context. And this isn't someone I've ever worked with, but I will just say, yeah, it's common. And it's common. So that's our samples of questions. Please keep sending your questions in, podcast@howwecanheal.com. I also really want to know what you liked about this season, the last 3 seasons, what you're looking for in the future. We want to take a moment just to walk down memory lane because Alex has listened to every episode. Haven't you, Bay?
I have.
You're the best. I think you're like,
sometimes more than once.
oh, I love it. You're so sweet. I'm always there for the recording. And sometimes I listen after. Well, I listen just to, I usually listen once ish. Yeah. But not always as much as Alex does. So he's the pro. He's the show pro. So what stood out to you this season? We talked a lot about dissociation. We had a lot of different folks. Some of the people you've met. What did you like?
I thought the first episode was great.
Oh, okay. That was all me.
Yeah. And because you had thought about it.
Yeah.
Thought about it.
Oh, it's true.
Thought about it.
I mean, the episode I was responding to was in the end of 2020 or 2021. I think I said it in episode 1. I think it was in 2021 and we're in 2023, right? Yeah. So it's like
we had talked about it.
It's been a full year and we had processed it.
Yeah.
You knew how disappointed I was.
And to actually hear it, I thought it was great.
Good.
It was well thought.
Okay, so I articulated my thoughts well because you've heard my process along the way. My crestfallen.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, it was like a lot of brainstorming.
Yeah.
And then to see it together, I was like, wow, I really like it.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. I like everyone.
Yeah.
That I listened to in season 3. I'm looking at the people here and I'm thinking Bethany because I met her in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And the way she explained dissociation was like right on.
Yeah.
It was so detailed, but like so easy to understand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what, I mean, I feel that way about Kathy as well. I feel that way when I listen to people quote research, right? When people are pulling like the stats from, like, I just feel like it gets really clear and organized for a moment, and you feel really grounded in this field that can feel really ungrounding. So that was one of the threads throughout this season that felt good to me. I mean, even hearing from Megan, our second episode, and just hearing her personal experience, that's really grounding to me because we can talk theoretically, diagnostically about trauma and dissociation, all these ways it shows up. But for her to just walk through her experience of the impact of the Boston Marathon bombing and share the poetry she's created from that 10 years later, it's like, oh, it's another angle on just really understanding what some of this stuff means in the context of someone's life.
And I was also thinking about Megan and the time that we spent together with her and
in Boston
and also during the retreat.
When she came out to California with Milo, he was her first son was not even a year old.
And keeping up with her through social media with the kids. And then finally, actually, through the book, understanding the story, like development of like what she was going through, what happened. And because you can't really ask, right?
Well, some people do, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But once you understand that you can't unless people want to talk about it.
Right.
And even then, like, you have to be committed to listen and to stay there.
Yeah.
Right.
And she talked about in that episode how the poetry came about from writing notes in her phone, late at night or whenever throughout the day when it was too much to share it with a real person because you would just say one thing and any human being is going to go, oh, that's terrible. And those reactions were too much.
Right? See, that's like, again, when you talk about dissociation, it's like putting the pieces back together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said this to Megan offline, and I believe in episode 2, that it's such a gift for her to share her story in this way, because I feel like there's this voyeuristic part when there's an event like that, the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013. People want to understand, they want to help, they want to lean in. I mean, some people do, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people, right? flock towards, and there's can't even be that voyeuristic, like, tell me the story. Sometimes it's tell me because I think it'll be healing for you. And sometimes it's just, I can't look away from this and I want to know for the sake of the news or for the sake of myself. And so I feel like for her to have done the deep healing work that she's done on so many levels and then put it out in this form, it's this beautiful combination. And I did say this to her during the episode. It's this beautiful combination of her genuine healing process and her sharing what she wants to share, and people being able to get a window into something that is really intense, that, like, hopefully, knock on all the wood, like, not all of us are going to go through, but there's a natural curiosity for at the same time of what was that like, right? And so I think that helps, it's a way to connect, and it's also a way to really ground, what are we talking about here? Like, why are we talking about dissociation, and why is it important, and who needs to know about it, and when and where and why? And, in circumstances like what Megan went through and what all of Boston faced, during that attack, like, the more people who understand this, the better. Right. And even in the process of healing, the more we can have self-compassion through, especially when it's a long, arduous, winding road of healing. And it's not, 10 sessions of an evidence-based practice, but it's a journey, and it's a life change. I think it really helps when we have that context and that compassion.
I agree.
Anything else that stood out to you this season?
EMDR, Michael Coy.
Yeah. He's so succinct.
So thorough.
Yes. And has an amazing vocabulary. I feel like I get an education just speaking with him. Like, we've had so many meetings together, and he'll use a word and I'm like, I got to bring that one back. Yeah, that's great. Or I was secretary for ISSDD, and he would catch like my little spelling things, and I'd be like, at first. And then I was like, you know what? Thank you. You're making me better.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I make so many mistakes. I'd be like, you know what? This is learning. This is good.
So consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. And very meticulous, I think, which is important when we're talking about this topic of EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing therapy for trauma survivors, particularly people who are experiencing dissociation. I think you need that level of, like, discernment and refinement. You can't just like throw it all at the wall and see what happens. As he said in the episode, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. You've got to be careful with it and skillful with it. And he really is. And I so appreciate that.
He's a professional.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Through and through.
On and off.
Yeah. Another thing that stood out to me, I loved just Dr. Jennifer Gomez's episode. I've been wanting to have her on the show since season 1. And, her book is coming out, which is super exciting. And I love that our conversation was so long. It turned into 2 episodes. But the second part, which was episode 7, when we really start talking about dreamstorming, I feel like I live in that space a lot where I'm like, well, what do I want this to look like? Right. And I don't know that in professional spaces, or I don't even know what professional spaces are, because so much is online these days, but I don't feel like I get a lot of engagement around that. Like, sometimes people feel like it's bypassing, or it's just like airy fairy, or it's just trying to create a utopia. But I really loved how grounded her work is, how deep she's gone. I mean, she talked about, like, I can't walk around just trying to prove to people that things like rape are harmful. Like, that can't be all my work. Like, duh. We've proved that. It's done. But to go from there to, what would it look like if we didn't have cultural betrayal? What would it look like in the world if that weren't an issue, or if that were healed, if we had moved all the way through that? Like, to see and feel that far forward, I just felt like lit with passion from her descriptions of what dreamstorming was to her and where she was taking it.
What if there was no trauma and no dissociation, but just simply, what if we just understood it? I mean, what if we had like empathy and it's just the wisdom that comes with like being able to connect with someone and understand them, and having them know that you get them, right?
Yeah, that connection. Yeah, and I think that the cool thing about the dreamstorming is, and this happened in the episode, like, you can take it as far as you want. Like, you can go, wouldn't it be nice if everyone knew about cultural betrayal trauma, which is her theory and what her book is about, and what we talk about in the episodes? Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, that would be nice. Wouldn't it be nice if that, if that were healed, or if that weren't a thing anymore? Like, what would it be like if that became like the dinosaurs? Remember when, right? So the thing I loved about dreamstorming is you can take it as far as you want to go. And I think it's helpful to look at those different steps too, right? Because those are part of the journey of healing. I think we're kind of like, people say set a goal and then work backwards, right? Like, so you want to buy a house, you know how much the down payment is. Well, you know how much your income is. Well, set a goal and put that money aside and just chip away at it and work towards it. Like these bigger ticket societal issues, it's kind of a similar way of doing that, right? Like really looking forward to like, where are we going here? Which I think, I've definitely felt in the last handful of years through pandemic and politics and all these things where it's like, it can be really easy to lose sight of that and just feel like you're just trying to get through the day, or you're just, dealing with so much onslaught of trauma or of challenge or of new developments, right, in the world. And it can feel like, oh, I don't even know where we're going. I'm just going to go to sleep. And that's fine. Like we have those days, but I do think it's important to have that perspective and the opportunity to step back and go, where do we want it to go? Especially when we're talking about these bigger societal issues.
Yeah.
So on that note, what are you going to say?
Mary and Kate.
Yeah.
I just love how personable she is.
Yeah.
And how she's like such a relationship person.
Mm-hmm.
And she does research.
She really gets attachment, right? And how that
Yeah.
impacts things. Yeah. As our baby coos in her bassinet right here. If she wakes up, we'll bring her on video.
Might be time to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to get her? I think she's still sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never wake a sleeping baby, they say. I get it now. I get it.
I mean, it's kind of nice.
There's a time and a place.
Iris sleeping, booming, sleeping.
Well, it's a whole family affair on this episode today.
And they were just going off.
They were just, there's a party next door, a graduation party. They were just hounding away. So they've calmed it down for us. We set the vibe, we set the tone. So I just want to thank and give a shout out to everyone who was on this season. Megan Zippin, Michael Coy, Bethany Brand, Marianne Kate, Dr. Gomez. I should doctor everyone evenly then. Dr. Brand, Dr. Kate, Dr. Gomez, Kathy Steele, Simone Reinders, Guy McPherson, Wendy Lemke. We did have a few folks slated for this season that just, scheduling and things we had to reschedule a little bit later. So hopefully in the future, we'll have Ruth Lanius, David Archer, and Deb Dana. Actually, we have most of those interviews scheduled for the future to record. I just don't want to make any promises until they've been recorded, because we got to get on the same time zone and record them before we produce them and send them to you. So that's a little sneak peek into the future of possibly season 4. Those were, season 3 topics. And there's a lot of places I'd love to go from here in terms of the show. So I'd love to hear from each of you as listeners. What else do you want to learn about trauma and dissociation? For sure, but that's not all of it, right? I also want to explore healing across genres, situations, different, circles in the world. One that's become very interesting to me of late is pregnancy, labor and delivery, postpartum care, parenthood, motherhood. So I'd love to hear your questions along those lines. And I've had lots of thoughts of bringing my midwife on the show, or my postpartum doula, or, just different people's work that I came across in my own experience of pregnancy. There's a whole world there, and there's a lot of really interesting, actually, connections to the work that I do that I feel like it rounds out. So I want to articulate that, and I want to bring some of those folks on the show. And then there's also the whole athletics, healing in athletics and sports. Those of you who don't know, I think we talked about it here, that Alex and I met running a 100-mile race in Auburn, California. And there's actually another 100-mile race ending in Auburn, California really soon, Western states. So shout out to all the athletes who, by the time this episode comes out, have done that race and are supporting folks doing it. But I've, come to know these really amazing athletes who have different perspectives on being in your body and doing, some pretty intense athletic feats like running 100 miles or, running, hiking, cycling, being in the outdoors. And I think there's a couple angles there. There's sports and athletics can be healing. There's learning from injuries that folks have as athletes and recovering from that and the lessons that come from that, the wisdom. And there's also this larger arc of what does healing look like in your sport? We saw a panel up at Palisades Tahoe. We saw a panel up at Palisades Tahoe where, it was all these different trail runners. And they're just talking about, well, what is happening in trail running right now? What does the future of trail running look like? What's the culture, right? How are we actively looking to make it more inclusive in terms of race and ethnicity and gender, right? So many of these races have male, female entries, and they're working through, non-binary or transgender entries. So there's a lot of this like larger evolution in sport that I'm interested in. And I'd love to have some of those folks on the show. Also artists and creatives. Now that I just finished watching the third season of Ted Lasso for the third time. I really love Ted Lasso. I know some of you did too. I know some of you probably haven't seen it. It was a show on Apple TV that's about sport, right? It's about a football team, soccer/football team in the UK that's coached by a fellow from Kansas, Ted Lasso. But just creating things that move people, right? I know people got tattoos with the believe sign or be curious, not judgmental from one of the episodes. And so, yeah, that's another thing I'd love to have a season or an arc around, just, interviewing some folks who are artists and creatives. I know we had Kira Willie on the show who does yoga music for kids. That was back in season 1. Yeah, let's get the Ted Lasso cast. What do you think?
I like it.
Okay, I'm going to put that out there.
Is after or before Michelle Obama? Oh,
Michelle Obama, she can come before if she wants. We'll schedule her first. We'll talk about leadership and institutional courage. We'll talk about whatever Michelle Obama wants to talk about, honestly. Whatever you want, Mrs. President. Come on down. Actually, that is interesting because they're talking politics. And I was talking with Marianne Williamson, who said she would come on the show, but that was right before she announced that she was running for president. So she might be a little too busy now. So TBD. We'll see. But I do really want to hear from you. So let me know what you're interested in. Let me know what your questions are. Please keep sending over recommendations for folks you think would be great on the show. We archive all of those and, continue. I have so many ideas. I really have a document with lists and lists and lists of names. And so we're just moving through them as we can sustainably because I want to keep this coming to you. So I just want to thank each of you for listening along and for being a part of this journey with me and with us. I'm in an interesting period, just becoming a mother of personal and professional change. And here she comes. Okay, this is why you got to follow on YouTube, y'all, because you can hear it. Her little noises, but you can see it if you're on YouTube. This is Isabella. Say hi, Isabella. Show them you're stretching your yoga. She's very strong, strong legs. I knew since I was pregnant with her, but I definitely knew as soon as I held her and ever since. Strong legs, strong arms, strong brain, strong heart. And I mean, pretty adorable. I'm not going to show pony her. I'm not going to, No. But oh my God, all the love, just all the love. Do you see all the love? Do you feel all the love? Yeah, this is our baby Isabella. Perhaps she will say some more words in a future podcast, but for now it's just little noises. Little noises. So it's night time for most of us now. I just wanted to say I'm going to be creating some new things. So keep in touch. Go on the How We Can Heal website. That's howwecanheal.com and sign up for email updates just to hear about everything that's happening there. All right. If you're watching on video now, Boomy Bear, the big brown dogums, is in the background. So everybody's coming out to say goodbye.
Come here, buddy. Come.
This fall, I'm going to create something that's an experience for anyone who's seeking freedom from trauma. Trauma has been a big part of my life and my work. And, I think a lot of us want to move beyond it and not just heal and not just recover, but, integrate and transmute and transform. So go ahead and go to howwecanheal.com, get on my emailing list there. You can also email podcast@howwecanheal.com. more stuff coming soon. All right. And I really appreciate you. And I really appreciate all the love. Those of you who are on the email list and who have sent lots of love for me and us and Isabella as we've gone into this transition. Just thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sending tons of love right back to each of you. Thanks for being here. And thanks for listening to the show.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts?
Look forward to listening.
Final thoughts from the baby girl.
We look forward to listening.
Come to mama. To mama, babes. Come. All right, y'all. Take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening. My hope is that you walk away from these episodes feeling supported and like you have a place to come to find the hope and inspiration you need to take your next small step forward. For more information and resources, please visit my website, howwecanheal.com. There, you'll find tons of helpful resources and the full transcript of each show. You can also click the podcast menu to submit requests for upcoming topics and guests. I look forward to hearing your ideas.